Hi, so I'm Chris Morris, and I've just been asked to do a little video for the NEF CDT website, talking a little bit about my career progression, how I've got where I am, and so yeah, let's have a little start. So first of all, who am I? So I'm Chris Morris. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College. I grew up in Bristol, and I went to university in Sheffield, but I'll sort of get onto that in a little bit. My PhD is in we're trying to better understand creep crack growth. So creep is high temperature deformation. So it's effectively trying to understand high temperature cracking in our nuclear reactor welded components. So I'll start with my A levels. I did a pretty standard lot of A levels for kind of engineering or even for nuclear. So I did maths, physics, chemistry. I also did product design. I've always been quite handy, and actually that translates really well to the labs. As a PhD student, you do way more manual tasks in labs as opposed to anything else. So actually doing the product design is pretty useful. Obviously, those took me forward really well and led to me doing a degree at Sheffield University. Now, I was always really interested in nuclear, even from quite a young age. The sort of carbon question was always quite relevant to me. So for me, it was about, could I start myself off doing something that I could make a difference with in terms of the carbon energy futures type world? And nuclear was always that for me. So even from the point of picking my A levels, I think I was interested in doing nuclear. So when it came to looking for a degree course, I thought that, well, first of all, I want to do something nuclear. So I looked at courses that were sort of nuclear engineering courses. Now in the UK, there aren't any undergrad courses which are just nuclear engineering. They're often with something. So for example, at Birmingham, I believe it was physics and nuclear engineering. At Sheffield University, it was material science and nuclear engineering. So I figured I'd go for the material science one because, well, I actually did some work experience at GKN back in, what was it, year 10? So I think you're about 15 or 16 years old. So it's just a week, completely useless work. I mean, at least I wasn't making coffees. I did actually make some Kevlar wrapped components. And whilst I was there was a material scientist who effectively told me that if I do material science and I'm experienced and good at that job, then I'd have a job for life because it's an incredibly valuable skill. So to me, that sounded like a really good option. So in my head, I want to do nuclear. I want to do something that sort of helps with our carbon future. And also I want to be a material scientist. So that led to me doing my degree at Sheffield University. So I never really had to think about choosing modules or picking this or that, purely just because I was always interested in nuclear, so I just picked the nuclear modules. So heading through my degree, first year, second year, standard fare. But one of the interesting things about the degree course at Sheffield University is that you do work experience at the end of your third year. So you do like a shortened third year, you do work experience. So I did 6 months of work experience at Sellafield. So you can pick wherever you want to go. You have to apply normal application routes. And yeah, working at Sellafield was a really interesting experience. It's effectively like a living nuclear museum, like Polder Hall, like the UK's first nuclear power plant is there. So it's a fascinating place from a nuclear engineering perspective because it literally is the history of nuclear engineering in the UK. So yeah, that was really interesting. The tricky bit was the work. So I took the impression that my third year work experience, so going to Sellafield, my impression was that that would be a good simulation of getting a job. So if I wanted to get a job in nuclear after finishing my degree, I would probably get a good sense of what it would be like from that. And then doing the master's project in my final year, I'd get a good sense of hopefully what doing a PhD would be like, and sort of judge based on that what I want to do. So working at Sellafield was great. I was given a lot of responsibility, a lot of work, but frankly, it's not quite what I wanted at that time. I liked the independently led research I was able to do for my master's project. Sellafield, I was always very directed. And of course, as you progress through the company and you do other things, you can have a bit more control over what you're prioritizing, what you think is interesting. But I mean, while I was at Sellafield, my line manager and his manager both had PhDs in nuclear engineering or related fields. So in my head, there didn't really seem to be much of a distinct advantage from not doing the PhD. In fact, if anything, it seemed like I'd probably progress faster in the nuclear industry if I had a PhD. And I've been told as much about the metallurgy industry. So what this resulted in is at the end of my work experience, I had resolved that maybe I would work at Sellafield in the future, but in the short term, it seemed like it would be counterproductive not to do a PhD. So I then went into my final year, my master's year, and I absolutely loved it. My supervisor was very hands-off. He's a very busy man, and I was really happy with that because it meant that I could lead the research, I could do exactly what I wanted to do, and everything was my responsibility. And taking that personal responsibility in your degree is, I think, is really useful. For me, it's always been interesting, and something I didn't like so much about the labs were that there was always a guiding force telling you to do this or to do that. And I found that my master's project, by getting this really hands-off approach from my supervisor, I was really able to just run with it and do exactly what I wanted and what I thought would be best for the PhD, which actually turned out amazingly. I ended up with what I'd consider to be it's certainly the largest piece of work I've ever produced, but probably the best piece of work I've ever produced. And that really gave me the motivation to do a PhD. So with my sort of boundary conditions of I wanted to do a PhD and I wanted it to be in nuclear, that leaves you with few options. Nuclear PhDs are everywhere, but if you want to do it in a CDT, there are two CDTs. There's a green CDT up in the north, and there is the Imperial College-based Nuclear Energy Future CDT down in the south. Now, I had already lived up in the north. I lived in Sheffield, so I figured it was just about time to come down south. And I've always been a big fan of London, so I figured it would be a really exciting opportunity to be in the first generation of NEF and join in there. So I did my interviews, I travelled down, I selected a few PhDs, I had some very poor interviews, I had some reasonably good interviews. Thankfully, those reasonably good interviews happened because it meant that at the end of the day, I could do my PhD at Imperial. Also, I'm the cohort rep for the first year. I was always really very interested in making sure the PhD environment is as close as possible. It sort of has a nice family feel and there's as much there as possible, because a lot of PhD students can struggle. It can be quite a lonely existence if you're not, if you don't have that sort of good safety net. So my intention with the NEF CDT, being the NEF CDT rep, was always to make sure that everyone felt included and that there was a sense of a family sort of feeling, that we were a group of people you could speak to and feel listened to. And hopefully I've achieved that. Certainly with my cohort, it's kind of up to the other cohorts to do that for their years or maybe for your year. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of my life, of well, maybe not necessarily my life, but certainly my education. And it's really been a great experience so far. I've probably done the most stereotypically nuclear approach to this whole thing. And possibly, as I'm sure you'll hear from some of the other videos on this website, a lot of us became interested in nuclear later in life. So whatever suits you. If you're interested in nuclear now, then now is a great time to join in. And you'll certainly be welcome in NEF CDT. And I think that's everything. If you'd like to contact me, you can find me on the website. I think my email address is on there. I've written a few articles. I highly recommend you read them. They're great reads. But thank you for your time. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Chris Morris. I hope this has been useful. Ta-ra and best of luck.